today, the first game down in Miami, the first unusual decision came across, and it turned out to be a really, really, really good one. Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Pirates. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or hockey, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Penguins in the same place that you found this. Pirates 8, Nationals 4. Reliable sources inform me that the team is still undefeated at 5-0, that it's produced 39 runs in those 5 games, a 400 even on base percentage, and it's achieved that with, and I'm putting this into context, only 4 home runs, which means that certain things have been going right for this offense. Now, I've got a little bit of a skeptical thought about this that I'll share in a moment. But first comes the guy who was placed first in the order and has stayed there through all 5 of these games, and that's Connor Joe. Joe's not a guy that a lot of even the more diehard fans are going to be investing a lot of time on. He's someone who just seemingly came off the scrap heap, a late bloomer, the battle with cancer and everything. And by the time he got here, he was seen as someone who can be a nice little bench piece for you. You can move him from the infield to the outfield, a professional, good on-base skills, maybe above anything else that he brings. But this team's management, to their credit, and I hope you'll notice that I'm giving credit where due after an offseason in which I was pretty critical of this entire thing. That's kind of how this job's supposed to work. To their credit, Ben Cherington, Derek Shelton, others on the coaching staff challenged Joe to show up in spring training to challenge himself for a job, not a bench job, to start, or to at least get his way onto the field often enough that he'd end up with as many innings in the field and as many plate appearances as possible. And he did that. He took it seriously. He told me about it in Bradenton. Didn't apologize for it. Didn't, act like I'm going to take so-and-so's job or anything. He would just repeat what they told him. That they expected him to do this. He expected it of himself. He believed in himself enough to do it. So when the Pirates get Rowdy Tellez is not all that great historically against left-handed pitching. They knew Joe could handle first base defensively. They knew he could probably handle it better than Tellez does. And Tellez isn't terrible over there. And the Pirates also didn't seem as worried about right field as a lot of us, myself included, were. Because right field was kind of set up as it's going to be Edward Olivares or I already forgot the other dude's name from spring training. Oh, Billy McKinney. That was his name. Or Jack Sawinski would slide over there once Michael A. Taylor was signed. It looked like Joe was either going to meet this challenge or be a bench guy. Well, he's off to an 8-for-23 start. Half of those 8 hits have been doubles. He's got 5 RBIs. Last night, a couple hits, couple more RBIs. He's also walked 5 times. So, yeah, some of that's come because the Pirates have been seeing nothing but lefty starters. And that's okay. You're supposed to do what you're supposed to do in baseball. It's the greatest skill there is, being predictable in being productive. I asked Joe about the confidence that he's carrying to the plate, which is just palpable when you're watching him right now, how he's feeling up there.
I'm confident in my approach and my, the type of at-bats I'm putting together. Productive outs, finding the barrel, so that sort of stuff, helping the team, right? Like, go back to the first day against Cronin, guy on second base early, right? Like, yes. Move the runner, like that was something I was really proud of. So stuff like that and just competitiveness, I feel like I'm in a good spot.
Yeah, there's that too. You hear that in his tone? He always talks like that. He talks like he's like an NPR host, you know, those ones that are like really super serious and talk about wars and stuff that actually matters. That's him. That's what he sounds like. Now, he can joke around and whatever, and he can have fun, but for the most part, this is a pretty serious dude. And he, maybe as much as anybody else in that clubhouse, gets commonly labeled by the people around him as being a consummate professional. That's how he conducts himself. Now, is he going to keep up a 350 pace all season? No, of course not. Because he's not going to see lefties all season long either. But he's a good player. And he just might be a little bit more than that. So where was I going with the little skeptical thing? Listen, I'm the last one to be raining on anybody's parade. The Pirates are playing good baseball, and they're playing it in all facets. They're easily more in belief of what they're doing now than they were when they started out 20-8 last season. But if there's one number I'd really like to see change for this team, and I mean change for the worse, ironically, it's batting average on balls in play. Joe has been screaming his hits. It's kind of why I'm singling him out today. The Pirates have also benefited from, and I mean hugely, baseball's finding grass, a lot of infield hits, a lot of outfielders for the other team diving for balls that they don't get to and it gets past them. You've watched these games. You know what I'm talking about. I don't need to quantify it for you, but I will anyway. The Pirates' batting average on balls in play right now is .383, and that's way too high. For anybody who's familiar with this statistic at all, every team should end up around 300. That's the median figure. It's the current median figure in Major League Baseball. It's the water finding its level, so to speak. And way more often than not, these squibbers and so forth are not going to result in hitters reaching base safely. They're just not. Now, does that mean that the Pirates are due for some kind of comeuppance like what they saw last May? I don't think so. I think there are more hitters who are more polished right now than what was in place at this time a year ago. Notably, Brian Hayes is just a different player. But it's something to keep an eye on. That's all I'm saying. Emphasizing the positives. Did you notice that? Emphasizing the positive. When we come back, J1Q. This portion of Daily Shot of Pirates is brought to you by our friends at North Shore Tavern. That's directly across Federal Street from PNC Park. It's home of Steak on a Stone, an eating experience, underscoring the word experience. The steak is brought to you partially cooked on an 800-degree stone, and you do the rest. It's a ton of fun, it's a great meal, and it's a baseball atmosphere like no other in Pittsburgh. North Shore Tavern, right across Federal Street from PNC Park. Today's J1Q comes from Anson, who says, come on, DK, no mention of you calling this last Friday on Daily Shot. You said we would be back on this program on Monday to talk about the Pirates being 4-0. And I know that prediction was made in jest, but still pretty cool. You know, Anson, I can't have it both ways. I can't say, as I do on a regular basis, that I'm not into predictions and that sort of thing. And then whenever I quite literally just joke about something, take claim to it, you know? That's not a good place to be planting anybody's flag. I will, though, say this. One of the things that happened over the course of spring training was that the more I was around these players, coaches, executives down in Bradenton, the more I learned about what it was that they were trying to do. And there's a difference between that and what maybe you'd normally think would happen in that setting, which is that I would hear everybody saying, this is great, we're going to be great, we're going to be awesome, look at us. That actually doesn't happen, at least not to any significant extent. It'll just be a handful of players saying something to that effect. But nobody's actually trying to sell you on the season. Nobody's trying to spin anything. Nobody's trying to put forth some PR. So what actually occurs is that, well, I mentioned one really compelling example of that in the opening segment, and that was with Connor Joe. You find out, oh, that's what they're going to do with Joe. Okay, so now I can go back to this other thing that I was commenting about a month ago, where I didn't know what their plan was for Joe, and say, okay, maybe I shouldn't have railed on the Rowdy Tellez signing versus Carlos Santana. Now, don't get me wrong, that could still look really, really bad. I'm just saying in the moment. Because I would now have a clearer understanding that even though Tellez isn't good against lefties, Joe is, and if you got yourself a platoon going, and I brought it up as a possibility back then, but not as, hey, they're actually going to do this. And I could do that with a couple other positions. The second base, being committed to Jared Triolo was something I didn't have on my bingo card at all. They had said that they were going to have I think they included Nick Gonzalez in it, so that they were going to have a battle between Triolo and Leover Peguero, and it didn't end up being that. Triolo was just a more sound, more dependable guy who they see as having really, really good defensive potential, but also has shown a consistent bat, maybe a more consistent, if not necessarily a more dynamic bat than Peguero's. So here again, now if I know that going in, I've got a little bit of a different outlook on that position. But the biggest example, and this is one I was actually joking around with Ben Cherington about the other day in Miami, was the pitching. If I'd had any idea, and remember, I don't even think that they did, that Jared Jones was going to have the kind of spring that he did, and that they'd be so moved by Jones's performance that they would blow off the usual bury the kid in the minors until he's Super 2 eligible or any of that. They just said he has to come north. He has to be part of the team. Not then, now. Okay. I didn't see any of that coming. I knew Jones was a nice prospect that they felt pretty strongly about, but I had no idea he'd be part of this. And then he shows up, of course, Saturday in Miami and looks like a modern day Steven Strasburg. Well, okay. Now your starting pitching scenario sure looks a lot different, doesn't it? Remember that number 2 starter I'd been pounding the desk over for months? Maybe this is it. And then from there, maybe Paul Skeens, who doesn't have to stay in the minors all that long, he becomes your number 1, or Mitch Keller's your number 1. Either way, you've got 3 guys. And then from there, you're picking from Martin Perez, Marco Gonzalez, who, by the way, acquitted himself well last night in D.C., Luis Ortiz could get back into that mix. I've been really impressed with Luis on and off the field. Quinn Priester's coming off a really good start in Indianapolis. Not just the numbers. I'm talking about his stuff, his usage of that stuff. Maybe he won't be down there very long. Now, what are we up to now? 6, 7? How many did I just bring up? I didn't even throw in Bailey Falter, because I'd like to throw out Bailey Falter. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody listening to Daily Shot of Pirates. And yeah, today's a day off. This is one of those rare times you can actually soak it in. Just check out the standings. It's fun. It's fun. Have fun with it. Stop being nervous about it. I get the sense from so many of you that you're like, I don't know what to think. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Have fun. This is the good part, Let's do it again tomorrow.